and experiences of others. And we have a wonderful panelists tonight who will be stirring this courageous conversation on reparations. I start with our director, Dr. Jody Lynn Allen. She's the Robert Francis Engs Director of the Lemon Project and Assistant Professor of History. We also have our special guest, Ms. Laura Hill, the founder and leader of Coming to the Table, Virginia's Historic Triangle Chapter, and the co-chairperson of the National Reparations Working Group. And we have a bit more to share about her. She has a pretty interesting bio here. She's a writer, and I've read some of your wonderful articles. Community leader and organizer. She is also, as mentioned, she's a part of the Race Reconciliation organization. Also, she's a leader. She brings diverse people together to have civil conversations about difficult topics such as race. Laura, she's a native of St. Mary's, Maryland, earned a bachelor's degree in mass communications from Hampton University, and her articles on race and racial issues have been featured broadly in several conversations. So again, thank you, Ms. Hill, for joining us tonight. We look forward to hearing your remarks in a moment. But I want to start with Dr. Allen, who's going to kind of ground our conversation on the article, The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates from the Atlantic 2014. And of course, you were all invited to read this article and to contribute to the conversation, and many of you all already have, and we definitely thank you for that. So at this time, I call on Dr. Allen to speak to us a bit about the article to kind of ground our conversation tonight. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, let me start over. Anyway, hi everybody. Thank you for introducing me, Jajuan, and thank you, Ms. Hill, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. And as Jajuan said, it's part of my task here is to give you a brief overview of some of the key points in the article. And also, as Jajuan says, I would encourage you to take the time to read it in its entirety, because there's a lot of very thought-provoking information there. Coates begins by laying out the reality. He points out what is at the basis of this call for reparations. He says 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of racist housing policy. Until we reckon with our compounding moral debts, America will never be whole. So since the end of slavery, reparations has been a word that has raised ire and hope in equal measure. In this straightforward and to the point 2014 article, Coates lays out his case. When he talks about reparations, he's not talking about a check. First and foremost, he is calling on America to accept its collective story, warts and all, and the consequences associated with those warts. Coates provided an answer to the typical response when reparations is mentioned. Typically we hear, no one alive today was enslaved or an enslaver, so stop talking about reparations. A very true statement. But another true statement is that everyone alive today still lives under the lasting effects of the institution of slavery. Slavery and its aftermath is now systemic. It is part of the body, and the entire body must be addressed if healing is to take place. Some of Coates's key points. One, we don't have to go back to slavery days to understand or find the need for reparations. Another, the system that was built by slavery and its immediate aftermath has stymied the growth of Black America, and therefore America as a whole. Next, Coates explains that the desires of Black America is not to take what's not theirs, but to fully take part in the promises laid out in the founding documents. Basically, they want access to the American dream. The opportunity under this would come the opportunity to establish generational wealth that can be passed on, of course. One of those requirements, I guess, when you think about establishing a pathway to the middle class, is home ownership, the opportunity to own property, so that they can provide a comfortable environment for their families, that they can establish families because they know that they will be able to support them. They want to educate their children. They want the protection of the law and the abolishment of terrorism. They also are willing to provide resistance when this is not coming easily. And this in the Coates' article was in the establishment of an organization to fight illegal and unethical mortgage loans and that type of thing. He also talks about the fallibility of the politics of respectability and the fact that Blacks know that that will never lead to full acceptance. The idea that the way you dress or the way you talk or the way you live, the way you keep your house, that's not going to abate racist attitudes, because it doesn't matter what you wear or where you live or where you go to school, racism will find you. So overall, I think what Coates is saying, that this is a journey that we need to take, that we have to take, that America has to take, but it will not be easy. And I will suggest that this journey will never be done. We will never be able to click a box and indicate finished, but we must keep our eyes on the prize, as the song goes, to keep moving forward. And I'll end with this quote from Coretta Scott King. Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and you win it in every generation. And we need to remember that so that we can keep moving forward. Thank you. Jajuan?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I told you would have stern remarks. Thank you so much for that. Well, next we're going to hear from Ms. Laura Hill, as mentioned earlier, the founder and leader of Coming to the Table, Historic Triangle, and who is also the co-chair of the Reparations Working Group of Coming to the Table. And you have about 20 minutes to kind of really discuss your work and also discuss reparations and what that looks like, and other than a check. And so you got about 20 minutes just to kind of talk about your work, and we'll move on to the next part of the discussion.
Thank you. I am so delighted to be here to support the Living Project. And first, I'd like to introduce Coming to the Table's mission, vision, and our resources. Our mission at Coming to the Table is to take America beyond the legacy of enslavement. And we are working to see America heal from racial wounds resulting from centuries of slavery and the many forms of racism that slavery spawned. Our vision at Coming to the Table is the same as the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King. In his 1963 I Have a Dream speech, King said, "I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will come to the table, will sit down at the table of brotherhood." And that is our aim. Every month, Coming to the Table chapters all over the country bring people together to have that very difficult and clumsy and uncomfortable conversation about race. And in addition to our monthly meetings, we offer workshops on racial trauma, racial healing, educational programs. In February, we collaborated with Freedom Park, and we offered a Black History Month program. And earlier this month, on October 3rd, we collaborated with Williamsburg Action, and we co-sponsored the Heal Williamsburg, Heal the Nation Reparations and Racial Equity Rally. Now, before we get started in discussing reparations, I think it's really important to define reparations. And I like to keep things very simple. So the root word of reparations is repair. And reparations involves repairing what is broken. So how many of you out there know that we have some broken systems in our country? I mean, there is a reason that people of all socio and economic statuses are out demonstrating and marching as a result of the George Floyd murder. The George Floyd murder revealed what we've known in the African American community, and that is that we have broken policing and law enforcement systems. Also, the coronavirus pandemic unmasked our broken healthcare system, and African Americans are dying of coronavirus at rates disproportionately higher than other groups. We also know that there are racial disparities in how our children are educated and disciplined. So our educational system is broken, as well as disparities in housing. Our housing system is broken. And these signs are indicators that there needs to be an intervention. Now, how many of you, if you broke a bone in your body, would just let that bone stay broken? Well, I'm going to say this. I broke my leg last year, and letting my leg stay broken was not an option. We don't let broken bones, or even in our homes, when something breaks down, our HVAC system or the computer, we fix what is broken. But when it's a bone in your body, you understand that you need immediate medical intervention. You would understand that you needed to get to the ER. You would need x-rays. You understand that you might need pain medication, a cast, and even at some point physical therapy. Well, reparations is the intervention to repair our broken systems. So you could think of reparations in those terms. Now, what does reparations look like? Well, as Coates said, it doesn't always look like a paycheck. In fact, in my article, America, It's Time for a Racial Reckoning, I compared reparations to a package of services. I'm from a military family, and many of you know, some of you may not know, that in 1948, President Truman integrated the military. And as a result of that intervention, my father, like lots of African American military men, had access to equal housing, equal pay, equal medical care, insurance that other white servicemen had. And when he retired, he even had access to capital, to the GI Bill. He was able to buy a home and send his kids to college. And we, even in college, we had access to insurance and to funds for college. So I think that military benefit package is a model for what reparations can look like today. Now, examples of reparations that we're seeing in our state and in our country and locally. We're hearing more and more about reparations every day. And one reparations project that I'm really excited about is the Lemon Project. William and Mary's Lemon Project is an example of a reparative project. The first part of reparations is an acknowledgement, a recognition of historical harm. And I'm very proud that the College of William and Mary is planning to construct a memorial to the enslaved that helped to build the college and that the college owned. So that this is an example of a reparative or reparations project and what reparations can look like. Also, there are state legislatures that are looking at reparations bills, and one that I'm excited about is the Harriet Tubman Community Investment Act in my home state, which is Maryland. And this bill calls for the development of a program to offer reparations to descendants of enslaved people in the state of Maryland. Now, this bill has not yet been voted on. However, California earlier this month became the first state to pass reparations legislation. And what they passed was a bill that will call for the development of a commission that will research the impact that slavery had on Californians, and then will make recommendations to the legislature on how that can be addressed and remedied. And so that commission will be appointed by the governor and will convene in June of 2021. They will have 2 years to make a report, and that is a model for other states as well as for the US. Now, another reparations initiative that I'm excited about is a national reparations initiative. Anybody here familiar with HR 40? HR 40 is a bill that was introduced by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee to study and develop reparations for African Americans. And this bill is expected to be voted on by the end of this year. And through this website here, people are able to go and to find out whether their local congressman or woman support the bill. Now, in Hampton Roads, we know that the bill is being sponsored by Representative Bobby Scott. So it's very important that we contact our other leaders, our representatives, and let them know that we support HR 40 and we want to see this legislation passed. Also, there are local reparations initiatives. One that comes to mind is in Asheville, North Carolina. Coming to the Table has more than 40 chapters nationwide, and our Asheville, North Carolina sister chapter was involved in a reparations initiative this year. And we are so excited about what they did. They were able to be involved in a coalition of organizations that was very successful in getting a resolution passed, which included an apology from the city of Asheville, as well as a resolution for assistance with purchasing um, homes as well as business grants. So a package of services to the residents of Asheville. And since this was passed, many other municipalities nationwide have followed suit. So Buncombe County followed suit, Durham, North Carolina followed suit. And we are really hoping that in the state of Virginia, that Williamsburg, which is the birthplace of America, will lead the way in reparations and racial equity. So there's a lot going on concerning reparations. There are also personal reparations initiatives where people are not waiting for their city, state, and national governments to pass legislation. They're just taking it in their own hands and they're doing things to make amends. And one project that comes to mind is very dear to me is a book that was published called Uncle George and Me. It was written by Bill Sizemore, and he is a member of Coming to the Table. And he researched his family history, found out that his family enslaved Africans, and he wrote a book about his family. And the proceeds from the sale of the book were donated uh, to his the African American descendants of the people that his family enslaved, and it went toward a scholarship fund for them. So there's a lot going on with reparations, and I'm just excited to be a part of this opportunity to bring about racial healing and making amends for racial wounds that have happened in our nation as a result of slavery. All right.
Thank you so much for those remarks, those words to move us further into this discussion tonight. Um, we have many questions that are waiting, and I'm excited about asking some of those and delving into this a bit deeper. Um, and I want to start with a more general question in terms of how does the group, and I think you kind of spoke to this in terms of how the group sees reparations. And that was for Laura.
How does the group see reparations?
Yes, yes, the working group in terms of, yeah.
Okay, the Coming to the Table National Working Group, we see reparations as number one, starting with an acknowledgement and an apology for centuries of racial injustices. And we see reparations as an opportunity, again, to repair what has been broken, to repair these broken systems. And as I explained with a broken bone, we know that there has to be intervention. If you allow a bone to stay broken, it could be fatal. And if we allow our broken systems to just stay broken, if we look the other way and act like there's nothing wrong, it could be detrimental to our country. So we are 100% in support of reparations to right the historical wrongs in our nation.
Now, we had someone to comment earlier, and it kind of related to my own thoughts as it relates when we talk about the system and these broken systems. And some would argue that that they were designed this way, and they're doing what they were intended to do. That it was never a system that was created for the liberation of Black people. And so, what would be your response to that?
My response is absolutely. We know that. The sad thing is that these laws to enslave, to disenfranchise and disadvantage people based on the color of their skin and their ancestry, in the 17th and 18th century, and even the 19th century, many of these laws were passed right here in the historic triangle.
Yeah.
In Jamestown, Williamsburg. So yeah, these systems and these laws were designed, intentionally designed to not work in the best interest of people of African ancestry. And if you look at our founding documents, if you look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, you know, they are also evidence that these laws were not, these documents and laws were not written with African Americans' best interests at heart.
Yeah. And I also wanted to kind of turn to your article you wrote for the LA Progressive, and where you really made a clarion call that you kind of talked a bit about tonight. You said America, the article is called America, It's Time for Racial Reckoning. And you stated that effective reparations would dismantle our broken institutions that were intentionally designed to perpetuate the status quo. We need to create new initiatives that will level the playing fields. And in terms of dismantling, do you think because of this very long history of inequity in this caste system, because that's really what it is it possible for it ever to be dismantled?
I like to stay hopeful and say yes, it is. I don't know that we will see it completely dismantled in our lifetime, but I think it's important that, you know, every generation is tasked with making things better for the next generation. So I'm hopeful that we can dismantle the systems of oppression. And I'm also hopeful because I look at what's happened over the past 5 months. I mean, right now, more than 100 Confederate monuments have been torn down. And would you have thought that was possible at the beginning of this year? You see, no one would have imagined that happening. So it just goes to show all things are possible. We, you know, and they can happen very quickly, which we saw with the monuments being Confederate monuments being removed.
Yeah. I want to go to the other part of this first question because it was talking about in terms of how the group sees reparations. Is that creating educational, economic opportunities? What would it look like and what would the community's role be in that determination?
Well, the community's role is vital because what we have to understand is that the more than 200 years of institutionalized slavery, this required 3 organizations or 3 community organizations or stakeholders. Number one, it required the religious community, and the religious community did give slavery a stamp of approval. It also required the educational community, and it required the government, the state, local, state and local municipalities, as well as the federal government. So in order to dismantle the effects of slavery, it's going to require those three systems working together again. It's going to require the government, cities, counties, states, the federal government. It's also going to require the church,
Mhm,
and it's going to require us to be re-educated.
mhm,
So educational systems,
mhm.
school systems, as well as the colleges and universities.
Yeah. Yeah, you emphasize and make some really good points, especially on the local level and the community-based level. And been wondering if you think there may be a downside insofar as um, a focus on a national reckoning of reconstruction of repairing.
All right, can you repeat that? I wasn't quite sure
I said
what
you're
you were asking.
I said you made some really good points in terms of local and I mean city level initiatives that you mentioned look very promising. But what about on the national level? Um, I'm quite sure that's when things, if we know that's when things get very, very complicated. Um, so can you speak to some of those?
Well, I can say that I'm very encouraged by the HR 40 reparations bill. I'm encouraged by the fact that over 150 congressmen and women have endorsed it, or what they call co-sponsored it. So I'm excited about the fact that it is there is a plan to have this bill voted on later this year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this bill is very much like the California legislation that just passed.
Mm-hmm.
This bill calls for the establishment of a commission to research the effects of slavery, to research the generational impact of slavery. Because one thing that we understand, at publishing, excuse me, one thing that we understand and we published in a book on racial and historical harm
Mm-hmm.
is that racial trauma is generational. It's passed down from generation to generation. And also there was a study done by 23andMe, a DNA study that showed that there was evidence of racial trauma from the transatlantic slave trade. It was still evident in people today. So, there are ways to prove that yes, people are still being impacted by institutionalized slavery in America. And I'm excited about HR 40, and I'm very hopeful that that will pass so that this commission will be established on the federal level.
Thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
My next question is for Dr. Allen. Um, and it says, what can um, William and Mary or William and Mary do for the community or students in terms of reparations?
Well, I mean, as Ms. Hill said at the beginning, the establishment of the Lemon Project itself is an effort at repairing this 327 years of William and Mary history as it relates to the African American community, students and people in the local community. And so, I mean, what we're trying to do, the belief is that, and I think that supported in the Coates article, that the first step is acknowledging the realities of the history of this country.
Mm-hmm.
It's been swept under the rug, whatever term you want to use. It's been ignored. It's been overlooked in the archives. It's not in the written histories of the institution. this history of slavery and Jim Crow. And so one of the first things we have to do, and that we're in the process of doing, is uncovering and making that history public. Acknowledging the story, because you can't fix what you don't know about. You can't fix what you don't understand. And so that's a major part is through in terms of students on campus, providing this information through courses, through programs, events like this. But this also is one of the things we're doing. Everything we do is open to the community. And so, by that, because it's not just the campus community, but the local community also. We're looking at ways of providing services to the community that they want and need in this area, educational opportunities. And at some point, I do hope that we can figure out how to possibly do scholarships. As a state institution, it's a little, that can be challenging to offer particular types of scholarships. But that's not, we haven't given up on that idea. So yeah, we are looking, and we're looking to be collaborative. If you go on the website and read our report, you'll see some of the things we're trying to do. We're also trying to figure out how we can support local businesses, local African-American businesses, and BIPOC businesses, I guess I should say too. So we're always looking for ways to extend ourselves and therefore extend William and Mary, because I think by establishing the Lemon Project, William and Mary acknowledged its culpability and its need to begin repair work, because you have to do the repair before you can do the healing, before you can have real reconciliation. So we're actively working toward it as best we can.
And we have another question for you, which states, to what extent does William and Mary have an opportunity to further these discussions, specifically as a public research university, which essentially the Lemon Project is doing in many ways?
I'm sorry, could you say that? Could you read that again, please?
Okay, let's see. It says, to what extent does William and Mary have an opportunity to further these discussions, specifically as a public research university?
Okay. Well, I mean, one of the ways is certainly through our outreach to other organizations, to other colleges and universities. We are a very active part of Universities Studying Slavery, which is a consortium of universities across the United States and the United Kingdom that has acknowledged the connections to slavery. And again, I also want to point out, let me back up and say, William and Mary, from the beginning, part of our mission has also been to address the legacies of slavery too. And sometimes, I think because we're named after a man who was enslaved by William and Mary, people think we are only looking at slavery, but we're also looking at slavery and Jim Crow and other issues related to race and race relations in the country. But I mean, one of the things in terms of our outreach is that, again, we participate in Universities Studying Slavery, but we also are very active in conferences. I mean, we go and share this information. We also consult with other institutions, other universities in particular, that are trying to start this work. William and Mary was the second institution funded by the, that funded this work. Brown was the first. And so we get a lot of calls from other institutions who are looking to start, but also churches and different places, because there's really not an institution in this country that slavery and Jim Crow has not reached in one way or another. And so many institutions, but largely I will say it's colleges and universities, but also churches who are grappling with different issues related to this. Oh, go ahead. I'll let you ask me. I saw a comment in the chat, but I'll let you deal with that.
I didn't deal with a comment in the chat yet. I'm looking at the questions that are coming in.
Okay.
But it was, so we had a question about if enacting reparations will happen in conjunction with increasing equity across the board, and this was relating to campus, William and Mary, such as hiring, compensation, and promoting Black, Indigenous, and people of color in institutions such as William and Mary. That brings to mind the Lemon Project, the report, the first 8 years. Can you discuss some of those recommendations that you made for the university in that report that may relate to those issues that they just raised in terms of the broader issues?
Well, we endorsed. We didn't try to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So we endorsed many of the recommendations that were part of the president's task, that came out of the president's task force on race and race relations. One of those is to build a diverse and inclusive faculty, and the institution is definitely is working on that right now, as we speak, because it's the faculty is not very diverse. Neither really is the administration or the staff. We also support the establishment of a department of Africana Studies. While it's right now it's a program, and it doesn't have all of the abilities and opportunities that are afforded to a full department. And it does, for example, it doesn't have its own faculty. Faculty are kind of called together from different other departments. You can't obtain tenure through a program, and that type of thing. So we've supported that. We also endorsed the establishment of a project like the Lemon Project for the Native American history, and to look into the Native American history at William and Mary. Trying to think of, I don't have them all memorized, but we also agreed and offered to consult with faculty that are looking to include information about that, the research information that we're finding in their syllabi. We also, provide presentations for classes and for student groups and for other, organizations on campus. So we, the one thing that I did see in the chat is someone is sharing about the Student Assemblies Initiative on reparations, and we've spoken with them twice now in terms of supporting their work, and also actually invited, but this is that end of the semester crunch time, and so but we they offered to help us get the word out, and they we invited if they had been able to come to to be on the panel, but this is a crunch time for students, and so they weren't able to join us tonight, but we are offering our support and information to that group as it's working to look at reparations on campus.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My next question is for Laura,
Okay.
and it states, why not seek financial compensation, direct payments? Would it be expedient to hold the parties liable in federal court? And I wanted to ask about that as well, because there has been, in essence, reparations, so to speak, in that enslavers were giving compensation for when after slaves were emancipated. And so they were given monies. And there's quite a lot of evidence regarding that. So why not make a direct payment, or why not make the demand for money?
Well, that thank you. That's a very good um, suggestion, and I agree. Why not? There is evidence of reparations that the government has paid to other groups.
Mhm.
And the one that comes to mind were the Japanese and Asian Americans that were held in internment camps
Mhm.
um, during World War II
Mhm.
here in America.
Yeah.
So they received, I believe it was $20,000 per person.
Mhm.
Um, and, in researching that, the rationale was, well, it was very easy to find and to identify, uh, who was in the camp, in the internment camp, and who, you know, who they or their descendants were, because, this happened in the 20th century. And the argument has always been, well, we don't know who, to give a reparations check to, because no one is alive today that was enslaved, um, back in the 1700s or 1800s. What I'm very excited about is the fact that through DNA testing and through genealogical research, we can provide evidence. There is evidence of racial trauma. That's what the 23andMe study showed, that dated back to the transatlantic slave trade. So there's ways to establish that um, we are still being impacted today, um, from racial trauma that was experienced by our ancestors. I'm also excited about the genealogical projects that, well, number one, the Lemon Project is planning as a community engagement project, and also Williamsburg Action, another um, local racial justice advocacy group. They are also planning an initiative to help people do the research to find the records that can prove that they're linked to enslaved African Americans. And again, through DNA testing, evidence can prove the trauma.
Mhm.
So
Thanks.
oh no,
I'm
I
sorry.
was just gonna say, so I think a check is possible and it's already been done. So there's a precedent. But my concern, and the reason why I support a package of benefits, is because I would I would want to see more than a check. You know, when I think of lottery winners and they win a check, they get a check, and you know, sometimes they're back in the same position afterwards. But if there are systems that are put in place that provide access to capital for African American owned businesses, access to housing, you know, the Maryland bill, one of the things that this Harriet Tubman Community Investment Act is calling for grants for businesses, for African American businesses, but also student loan forgiveness and down payments for, to purchase homes. And I think that that whole package, which can also include a check, but a whole package of benefits, I think will serve the African community better and help us to achieve racial equity.
And I had another follow-up question. Says, has the study group researched what groups are doing in the Caribbean, Central and Latin America to request reparations from the European colonialists? So if you looked abroad in terms of what other countries and what other efforts are taking place in other places.
The country that we have examined is South Africa, and we've examined what happened when they had a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. The fact that they were a nation where institutionalized racism existed, and we've examined how they were able to racially transform their nation to the point where they even elected an African president. And so that is one nation that I have studied, and I think that Truth and Reconciliation initiative is so important because really it's all about truth telling. We've got to tell the truth about what happened. And yeah, it can be very painful. But telling the truth is critical for racial reconciliation.
So we have about 3 minutes left and want to leave it for closing remarks. Let me see if we have anything else going on in the chat room. So any closing remarks for our guest? Either one of you.
Go ahead, Jody. Jody, I nominate you.
Well, I guess once again, I want to thank those of you who were able to come and join us for this. This is our first formal discussion in terms of the Lemon Project on reparations, but it won't be our last. I think that it's important to talk about this. It's important for people, hopefully, not to feel threatened by this idea, but to understand that it's warranted and why it's warranted. And the only way to do that is to either listen to the information but I always encourage people to read for themselves in this establish their own opinion, of course. But there's a long history of keeping African Americans away from the so-called American dream. That the notion that everyone has access to this dream if you just work hard. And the reality is that you can work hard all your life and lose your home for some simple reason that you can't control. And that's and you can work hard and never get to own a home. If you read the articles, there are several examples of people who were the victims of fraud and thought they were buying a house. Some of them actually thought they were buying a house, but they were not. They missed one payment, and they lost not only the possible thousands of dollars that they had already paid, but they also lost their home. And so when you have the power to do those kinds of things to people and families, then there's nothing that they can do to fight against, to stop that, because they're not empowered to do so. And so what we're looking at, we're looking at opportunities here for equity, for the abolishment of terrorism in the communities. We're looking for the equal protection of the law, and we're looking for the application of the promises that were made in the founding documents. We're told to be proud of the country we come from in these wonderful documents, but they really did not apply to us, and they don't always apply to us now. And you see that as people are shot down in the streets or in their own front yards or in their own beds. And so these things are very important to address. And part of that addressing is reparations for generations of people who have not had the opportunity to pursue the American dream.
Ms. Hill?
Wow, Jody, you're a tough act to follow. I would just say that reparations, it's not a handout. The work has already been contributed to our nation. The wealth of our nation was made on the backs of enslaved Africans, people of African ancestry. We know that, and we have organizations, colleges and universities that have acknowledged that. I mean, even the White House was built using slave labor. So this is not the move for reparations is not asking for a handout. It's asking for what has already been paid through the sweat and tears equity of our ancestors, of Africans and enslaved Africans.
Thank you both for those wonderful closing statements, and thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. I do want to remind you to join us on Thursday at 7 p.m. for our last Lemon Legacies Porch Talk of the semester with Highland. Collaborative Conversations, William and Mary's Highland, Lemon's Legacy Porch Talk. And we hope that you join us again. Have a great night, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Jajuan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jajuan.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I forgot. No.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing your screen with me. For putting up all the links. All right. And thank you all for the invite. I appreciate it. Good night.
Good night.